Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, continuing with our summer scouting series as we take a deep dive into this Texas A&M Aggies team heading into the 2023 season. And I'll start out. This team, the last couple of years, has lived rent-free in my mind. Like, I cannot for the life of me figure this team out. And once again, I find myself heading into the 2023 season optimistic about this team. Like, I look at the depth chart, I look at what they have coming back and what they did in the transfer portal. Like, I think this team can be pretty good. Now, can they put it on the field is the question. Excited to get into it now. Before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys and Texas A&M. We've talked a lot of recruiting, obviously hitting on Cam Coleman, Draylon Miller. The support you guys have shown the boys does mean a lot. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. This is a team that we consistently talk about because it's a team that can bang with anyone in the country from a talent standpoint, from a firepower standpoint. I'm excited to get in this team. Dill, how are we feeling about the Aggies heading into 2023 here?
I mean, I think the first part, and I would imagine, I don't know for sure, but I'd imagine most Texas A&M fans are happy about the Bobby Petrino news.
Have to be.
And finally trying something else on offense because they've gone with the Jimbo show for now a handful of years, and it just has never really got going. It just feels like there's too much talent and has been too much talent for them to be as stagnant on offense as it's looked. So I'm excited for that change. You obviously had a super young team last year. It's still frankly young, but it's experienced. They've all played a lot of football.
I feel like people think that this whole Texas A&M class from that 2022 group left. Like, yeah, they had some guys leave, but most of that group is still on this roster.
And so they all played last year too. So
yeah, like a lot of them. And you're getting a lot of that. And getting back to that Jimbo Fisher, I want to have the Jimbo Fisher discussion for maybe 2 minutes, and then we'll move on. I think Jimbo Fisher is a good head coach at the college football level. I think that he's going to benefit in a big way from relinquishing, whether how much he relinquishes offensive control and play calling, we'll see. I think he's going to benefit in a big way. I've always thought he's just a little bit of an overrated offensive play caller. Like, he had that team at Florida State that broke all the records. That seemed to be more of a talent thing. Like, that whole offense got drafted into the NFL, and it had, I think, a little less to do with Jimbo Fisher and him being just a schematic mastermind on the offensive side of the ball. So I like it because Bobby Petrino has some serious chops, and you take a look at this offensive team and you allow Jimbo to kind of now just manage this team, be the general manager of this team like most head coaches do. I'm excited for the Aggies heading into 2023. And let's start on the offensive side of the ball with what I think is some of the better pass catchers in the whole entire country.
Well, and that's the thing. You have a loaded group of pass catchers. Getting Aeneas Smith back, I think, was huge. I think, again, being kind of the rock in that offense, being a guy you can very much depend on in big moments. I thought he was going pro. I thought for sure, given the ascendance of an Evan Stewart and what Moose Muhammad does, I thought they were going to lose Aeneas Smith. So to get him back is huge, but obviously it's the Evan Stewart show. I mean, he's the best wide receiver on this team by a mile.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's got to be Connor Wigman at this point. Like, I think he flashed enough where you going into year two, I think you have enough confidence with him to kind of take over. And at the end of the day, like, you're chasing a national title with that class that you brought in 2022. If you're winning a national title, it's going to be, I think, Connor Wigman throwing the football for this offense. But I agree. Like, any way you cut it, like, whoever wins that quarterback job, and Jimbo Fisher has been adamant that it's going to be a competition, going to have elite pass catchers. And I'd even go and shout out a guy in Noah Thomas, too, that is really, really exciting, a big body. And then Donovan Green at that tight end spot. Like, you look around the SEC, and I don't know if you can name that many better wide receiver rooms. Maybe at LSU, I think would give you some run. This Texas A&M team is loaded, and I'm
not convinced there's a wide receiver who's even particularly close to Evan Stewart in the SEC. Look across the country, like Marvin Harrison for sure right there. Besides, Evan Stewart, I think is so good. Only a true freshman last year, and with unsteady quarterback play. If they just elevate that room a little bit, and somebody figures out how to throw the ball more effectively and they block a little better, imagine the numbers Evan Stewart puts up and what this Aggies offense can be.
Yeah, and I don't know. Did you shout out Moose Muhammad? Because he's another guy that I like. Like, Aeneas Smith, we know. Evan Stewart, he's a stud. Moose Muhammad also probably going to be a guy that's playing on Sundays this time next year. Still, the running back room, like, I like it. You lose Devon Achane, and that hurts. Like, he was a phenomenal running back. But, man, You have one of the most talented kids from that 2023 class coming in Reuben Owens. And then you also have some experience with guys like Le'Veon Moss and Mari Daniels. Very good running back room. My question is, can this offensive line come together? Coach Adazio still there working with these guys. I need to see meaningful improvement from this group. And from the personnel standpoint, I think they can be a good group. It just needs to come together.
I mean, and talk about another fairly young unit last year. I mean,
Yes.
Dewberry playing a lot, Trey Zune playing a lot. You kind of looking across. You had a lot of sophomores and freshmen, and I don't see how this unit doesn't get better. I think Cam Dewberry is actually like a legit star in the making as offensive lineman. I think Trey Zune, I saw some commenters of ours getting after him a little bit in the comments, but I mean, the talent's there. You see the athleticism at the size he is. Like, again, if they just develop, and Adazio, say what you want about him as a head coach, but he's always been a very, very effective offensive line coach. If he can meld this unit that is talented, I think, into something, I think they might have something. And look out for Chase Basantes. I wouldn't be surprised to see him playing. He looked awesome in the spring game, I should say.
Agree, and I'd shout out my favorite guy in the offensive line, Bryce Foster, the center. Like, I think he's a true stud too. And like, you look, I think you might have some questions about depth, and if Chase Basantes can be one of those guys that can be the 6-man up and be solid if he needs to go in, you feel good about it. But that starting 5, if this group stays healthy and comes together, like, I don't think it's a bad group. And then we go to the defensive side of the ball before we get to the schedule, and it's I was looking at this
at the end of the day. I mean, this defense should be so good.
Dill, I don't know if you saw the stat when you're doing your prep. 208 rushing yards per game allowed by this Texas A&M defense. That is good for 122nd in the FBS. Like, one of the worst teams in the country at stopping the run. And I get it. You look at the schedule and you played some really good rushing attacks. I get that. This front 7, though, like, if they, again, similar to the conversation we had with this offensive line, man, you have to be so excited about this front 7 if it can come together, because the talent on that defensive line is absolutely crazy.
Because even, I mean, part of what you saw, like a Walter Nolan, I mean, when he was playing good,
he's going to be good.
I mean, to be that explosive, that athletic on the inside, and be strong enough to push guards around pretty easily, I thought. Like, again, it's a little bit like staying in your gap and not getting reached, and kind of playing those fundamentals along with the freak athleticism and the big plays, because they did make their share of negative plays for sure, but they also would have moments of not playing super sound football. But frankly, you look across, like, the guys who were playing were young. I mean, they were sophomores, they were freshmen. It's just a young group, and you just look for it to improve, and the talent's there. That was one thing that was obvious across the whole year. It's just playing fundamentally sound.
Yeah, I would completely echo that. You watch, like, in each of these guys, like, you go back and watch some of the tape, like, they all flash, and they're flashing at relatively young players. You know what I mean? Like Shamar Turner being a sophomore, Shamar Stewart being a true freshman, Walter Nolan being a true freshman. A lot of these guys were super young and dominating at points, like flashing absolute dominance.
Also flashing some like unsteady play that obviously you look at that rushing number, that's way too high, and that has to come down. But I'm just looking like Ken Walter Nolan, kind of Shamar Stewart and Shamar Turner, just up their level in consistency. Not even so much their level. Their level is really high, but just every play, not make those bad mistakes, playing outside of your gap, or not kind of holding down what you need to do at that exact moment.
That's where I would ask the Aggie fans. Like, I'm excited for guys like Walter Nolan, especially a guy like Shamar Stewart. I'm interested to hear, like, who is your breakout candidate? Because I feel like all these guys were like flashing some dominance. Like, who we taking as like breaking out, having that All-American season? I would love to hear that in the comment section again.
I want to know who my guy might be is Malik Silla. And again, you look across this board, you're really young. I think LT Overton played good too, but Silla to me looked like he had that real dynamic edge skill. Again, Shamar Stewart's more of a power guy. Like, he's just a handful. He's strong. He's a little tough to deal with. But I'm thinking Malik Silla might come out and turn some.
And your linebacker room is going to be dominant. Or not dominant, but it's just a steady group. Like, it's rare to have linebackers that come back and are as productive as guys like Chris Russell, Adrian Cooper. And then you get to the secondary. And I think this was the best unit in the country. Allowed only 156 yards through the air per game. And I think it gets even better, right? You bring back Damani Richardson, who is a bona fide stud. You lose Antonio Johnson, who we both liked in the NFL draft process. But Tyreek Chappell, stud. Tony Grimes legit first-round talent if he can put it together. Dill, this secondary group, you add a guy like Sam McCall, one of the more coveted kids from that 2022 class, should be one of the better groups that we see.
The secondary group looks loaded, and to me, getting back to Monty Richardson is just huge for this team as a whole because he did feel like the heartbeat guy. Like when he came out of that game in Miami, it almost felt like it shifted. And I know they were able to hang on and do what they had to do, but man, when he's on the field, he's just making plays. He
Baller.
hits. He does those things that I feel like that people juiced up. That play against Arkansas where he took the ball to the house in like very backyard football-esque. But I mean, those type of plays that he was making, I felt like it just brought something to this defense, like a little extra edge, almost like an Ed Reed you felt like at Miami if you watched the U on ESPN 30 for 30.
Ooh, yeah. So I would say, like, to what Aeneas Smith is to this offense, I think Damani Richardson is on that defense. Like the veteran guy where you have a bunch of young, talented dudes. Who are you turning to be kind of your guy? I think Damani Richardson could be that guy. And you got to look at the schedule. That's kind of the last piece of the puzzle. And looking at the schedule, I'm kind of a fan of how it lines up for Texas A&M. You got New Mexico, and because I think you're going to see some growing pains. I think you want to give Connor Wigman an ability to get his feet wet. And then you go, I mean, sign me up. Saturday, September 9th, going on the road to Miami. That's a game that I personally think the Aggies should win just from a talent standpoint. I mean, even if it's not fully brought together, but then you get UL Monroe, and then you get Auburn at home where that's still a work in progress. And you don't get into the meat of the schedule of Alabama and Tennessee until a little bit later. And then last game on the road at LSU, where that's where you need to be firing on all cylinders. Like, you're not going to beat Alabama. You're not going to beat Tennessee. You're not going to beat LSU if you're not clicking. And we say this every single year for this Aggies team. If this team clicks and comes together, they are one of the rare teams that have the firepower to be the best team in the country.
And you're right. They can probably gut this out just on talent alone until that Alabama game. I know I don't want to disrespect Arkansas, but like they did the same thing last year to an Arkansas team. They just grinded them out. They're just Moose Muhammad, Evan Stewart, like guys were just making plays that were Damani Richardson, just making plays that were too big for Arkansas essentially to deal with. And there's just too much talent. But I think you're right. You get like essentially 5 tune-up games, and then you got to be ready to rock and roll against Bama and Tennessee because those teams are going to bring it.
And we're going to find out a lot because I think let's see how this offense looks, who's calling the plays, and Bobby Petrino, if he is calling the plays, is going to have some games to kind of get it going, and then we'll see what this offense looks like when Alabama comes to town, and then you got to go on the road to Knoxville. That's where I think Texas A&M needs to hit their peak. And again, if they hit their peak, this is going to be one of the more fun teams in college football to watch. And once again, I find myself late summer falling in love with this Texas A&M Aggies team. It probably will hurt me in the end again, but I'm very high on this team. Excited to watch them in 2023. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.